Welcome to the Tech Leaders Podcast Women in Tech Series Special. We have got the brilliant Carenza Jennings who's co-hosting. I'm so excited to get Carenza on. For the next 4 weeks, we will cover some of the most important topics. We'll also be finding out loads about these inspiring women in the tech sector and just talking about their career, their journey, the hurdles that they faced, and everything else to do with women in tech in the UK right now. So let's move on to Alice then. So Entrepreneur First, a really noteworthy organisation within the new burst of entrepreneurialism that swept through the UK in the last 20 to 25 years. So I was really excited about getting Alice on, but just wanted to chuck this one in as a segue into you, because you know Alice as well.
Yes.
And last time it was Buckingham Palace, but this time it was Downing Street. Is that right?
That is true, actually. I did actually meet Alice for the very first time, at the risk of name dropping, in Downing Street.
I dropped the name there, Karen, so you're okay.
Yes, we had both been invited. I was working for the BBC at the time. I was the BBC's head of strategic delivery and designing a big digital strategy for the Beeb. And we had both been invited to a round table where we were discussing opening up the opportunities of STEM to the UK, and particularly for girls and young women. She's an outstanding person. I mean, she has got great vision, great clarity of thought. You know, what I'm hoping to get out of her is a sense of talking through some of the mistakes she's made and helping unpack that and what went wrong and why. And I'm hoping through that she might give us some of her tips and kind of recipes for success. And also just, you know, a theme of resilience, I think, with Alice. You know, she's gone through a lot and she's achieved some extraordinary things.
So without further ado, let's go over to the show's guest, the co-founder of Entrepreneur First and Code First Girls, the brilliant Alice Bentinck. Alice, thank you so much for coming on the show. For listeners who may not be completely familiar, could you just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Now, almost 10 years ago, I set up a company called Entrepreneur First. It's a company that helps people found companies. We see ourselves as a talent investor. We find individuals at the early stages of their career who are interested in becoming founders, but typically don't have a co-founder, don't know exactly the idea that they're going to work on, don't have access to capital. And Entrepreneur First's raison d'etre is to make sure the world isn't missing out on some of its best founders and giving them the resources they need to be able to go from being an individual who is incredibly talented, very ambitious, very smart, to being a founder of a company.
I love the quote I read that you said a little while ago, saying that you're looking for the world's most ambitious people to build the world's most important companies.
Yeah, very much so. And I suppose one of our big beliefs is that if you're not based in Silicon Valley, there are a bunch of things, either social norms, cultural norms, peer pressure, family pressure, or structural barriers, just that there aren't that many people around you that want to start companies at the same time, that stop amazingly talented people from becoming founders. And, you know, in the UK, when I was starting my career, when I left university back in 2008, the way that you displayed your ambition was to become a management consultant, which is what I did, or become a banker or a lawyer or whatever it may be. And that's beginning to change, but actually there's still so many norms around the career paths that you take. I always find it funny that every country that we work in, there's a different norm. So for example, in Singapore, the most aspirational thing you can do is join the government. It's also one of the most lucrative things you can do. And so it really pivots people's career aspirations. But I suppose one of the things that makes me so excited is that over the last 10 years, we are seeing a kind of global shift in the way that people think about their careers and think about entrepreneurship, not as just a possibility, but an aspirational choice.
I absolutely love the fact that you're giving permission to people to feel ambitious. You know, it's such an important thing, isn't it? And I think a lot of us grow up and ambition can be almost like a dirty word. And a lot of us are a little bit hesitant about it. And I think particularly girls growing up, it feels like ambition is sort of something that feels like a negative thing, but actually you've helped power it into people's thinking, and you've helped show it's a hugely positive thing, because it's not just positive for what you can do for you, your family, your colleagues, but what you can then go on to do for society, the tech revolution that you're helping power.
I don't know why ambition seems to feel quite selfish, or has been positioned as something that's quite selfish. Maybe this is the kind of the 1990s banker sort of thing, that ambition is all about personal greed and personal success. What excites me so much about the founders that I work with of whatever gender, is that ambition now seems to be so much more focused on impact. If you ask the people that join us, why do they want to become a founder? The number one answer is they want to have impact. They know that technology entrepreneurship, software entrepreneurship in particular, with not very much money, they can impact millions, if not billions of people around the world. And they want to improve people's lives. One of the most popular areas that people work on at EF is health tech. So whether it be clean meat, whether it be diagnostic devices, people want to work on technology. This wave of founders that are coming through want to work on technology that will change and improve people's lives.
So can I ask you, Alice, you talk a lot about ambition, and that comes across in lots of the sort of marketing collateral on the website of Entrepreneur First. Can you tell us a little bit about your sort of the early days of your career, and from the point of education? I understand you went into consultancy, you worked with McKinsey's.
Yes, I suppose when I left university, I sort of wanted to do whatever felt like the most ambitious and impressive thing that I could do. And I'd heard of consulting. It seemed pretty generic, wouldn't pin me down to anything. And when I was at university, I'd done a bunch of social enterprise startup stuff, which I'd really enjoyed. And I'd always thought that one day I'd like to be a founder, but it didn't even seem possible. I didn't even consider it as a possibility post graduating because it just seemed totally crazy. So I became a strategy consultant, and it was a really useful transition to be surrounded by a bunch of really ambitious people who didn't all necessarily want to be strategy consultants for the rest of their lives. Who also saw consulting as a leapfrog to something else. And I suppose interestingly, many of them ended up seeing and using it as a leapfrog to become founders. And I was lucky enough to meet my co-founder, Matt Clifford at McKinsey. And, we became friends on pretty much our first day of working there. And kind of throughout our time, we'd talk about ideas and talk about things that we might work on. And we used to have this thing where you did 2 years as a grad scheme, and then you had to leave. And so basically, you felt you'd only just joined, but after about 12 months, people would be like, cool, what are you going to do next? What's next? And I suppose the traditional model was that you do an MBA. But the kind of cohort that I was part of, more and more people were thinking about startups and joining small companies and joining small high growth companies. And Matt and I, with a couple of other friends from McKinsey, I think went through a very typical bad startup process where there were 5 of us. We tried to come up with an idea together, and then we managed to write off this idea by building a mammoth Excel model together. And we did this model and realized, well, the market just isn't going to work. I think now, 10 years on, having supported hundreds of companies from zero to seed funding, that's just not how you create a company. It's not how you go through the process of developing an idea. But to be totally honest, when we first started Entrepreneur First, it was much more like the Teach First model where, well, of course these people aren't going to succeed, so they can mess around with entrepreneurship for a couple of years and then we'll get them a job. And when we did the first cohort, the thing that surprised us most is that they built real companies that got funded. It worked. And that kind of then changed the trajectory of what we ended up doing.
It's amazing that you were able to turn your own failures into a learning point and then use that to inform then what you went on to do. I think that's really fantastic. The fact that you recognize that actually your own attempts didn't quite work out, but actually you pivoted brilliantly, which is one of the kind of characteristics, isn't it, of a great entrepreneur. So what is the right way to set up a company? Because you said that you did it the wrong way. What is the right way?
So I suppose what were the things that we did wrong? So we have seen if you are starting totally from scratch, i.e. no idea, no pre-existing team, actually the fewer people involved, the better. So trying to get 5 people to coalesce around an idea and be aligned on that idea and work effectively together is really, really hard. So at Entrepreneur First, we build teams of 2. We take strangers and turn them into co-founders. And actually the dynamics with a team of 2 are very clean. As soon as you add a third person in, everyone always wants to add a third co-founder. As soon as they add a third person in, you're suddenly managing a much more complex web of relationships. It's actually much harder in the very early days to keep the idea aligned. So that would probably be the first mistake. I think the second mistake that we made was to believe that the way that you understand an idea is by looking at the market. But day one, that doesn't matter. Day one, what matters is working out whether there could be anything there at all. And so when we built this Excel model to try and understand how big the market could be, we were missing the process of finding an insight, of even understanding what the market could be. So really the way that you go about that kind of initial ideation process is you have to talk to customers. You have to have a belief, a hunch about what you think you might need to create, and then you need to start testing it with customers and use that kind of iterative process to develop it over time, rather than, I think, the slightly arrogant process that we went through, which was we've sat in a room, we've come up with something, we've run the numbers, it's not going to work. If we just started talking to people, our depth of insight, our level of insight would have been far greater.
I mean, I was very struck by the fact that very early on, you were able to attract the backing of Reid Hoffman, who's the co-founder of LinkedIn, and the fact that he believed in you and helped give sort of more power to your elbow in what you were trying to build, I think was incredibly impressive. And I just wondered, how did you manage to attract his attention to back you in those very early days?
It was reasonably early, but not that early. To be honest, the first couple of years of EF were a bit of a mess. We didn't really know what we were doing. We were a not-for-profit. We spent 3 years as a not-for-profit before converting to a for-profit company. And Reid invested us in 2017. So we'd been going for about 6 years at that point. In some ways, it's, we always say to our founders, don't go to Silicon Valley and expect the street to be paved with gold. Don't expect you can walk into a Reid Hoffman's office and ask him for money and he'll just give you money. But to be honest, that is what happened. I think we were in there at the LinkedIn HQ for about 14 minutes when he was like, great, how much money do you want? What are the terms? But the reason why that worked was because we had 4 or 5 different advisors, mentors, investors speak to Reid beforehand and basically say, look, you need to invest in these guys. Matt and Alice are doing something really interesting. You should meet them and take the risk. So yeah, the importance of having a network that can support and advocate for you, particularly in the early days of building your company. If we tried to cold approach Reid, I doubt he would have responded to us. He must be cold approached by hundreds, if not thousands of people every year. So working out how you can build your network as a founder as you go through that process. But one of the things we often hear from people who want to be a founder but don't think now is the right time is they often say, well, I don't have enough of a network. I'm early in my career. I need to build a network. What people often forget is that you do have a network. Every friend, every family member, everyone you've ever worked with, that is a network. That is the beginning of anyone you're connected to on any social media platform, that is a network. Don't underestimate the network that you already have.
I think that's a very compelling point, and it's one of the wonderful things that you've done with Code First Girls, actually. And I wonder if you'd like to tell us a little bit about the story of Code First Girls, why you set it up, and the networks that you're helping these young women build.
When we first started Entrepreneur First, one of the glaringly obvious issues was that we just weren't getting as many applications from women as we were from men. And we saw that translate into the program. So we had about, I think, 20% women on our first cohort. And in some ways, naively, but naivety can sometimes be helpful. We're like, well, we'll just fix this problem. We'll start this organization called Code First Girls, and we'll teach women to code. And if we teach them to code, they'll want to be founders. Now, obviously, it's not quite as simple as that. And Code First Girls is now an independent organisation that teaches women to code for free, often at university, at that point where they're just deciding what to do with their careers. And often it's working with women who have taken the choice to go into arts degrees, art backgrounds, who weren't really aware of technology or weren't interested in technology as they were growing up. But actually, as they get older and they look at the skills required to join the workforce, they realize what an important and empowering skill having, even if it's just basic coding skills, can be. So we run programs all around the country and now increasingly online as well. We work with major employers as well to help give them access to upskilled young women at the beginning of their careers and to try and improve gender diversity within both big tech companies and startup tech companies. And over the last, I think it's now 7 or 8 years, I think we've had 30,000 women go through the Code First Girls course. And to your point, Karenza, it's so much of it is about network. One of the early taglines for Code First Girls was, tech shouldn't be a boys' club. I started at EF when I was 25, and, as a young woman, you'd walk into these events and you'd just be like surrounded by men being men or like dudes being dudes. And it just felt like so bro-y and, it's just exhausting going to these events. One of the key parts of Code First Girls was just making it so that when they went to events, they already knew people there. There were people like them, and there were women that they'd been on courses with or met at the Code First Girls conference. And suddenly it began creating this network, particularly in and around London and Manchester, where there's just a critical mass of women who'd been through Code First Girls, who knew each other and who wanted to support each other on their careers. So I think the wonderful thing about the tech industry is people want to get to know you. People want to get to know each other. People want to build their networks. They're so open that networking isn't hard. It's not hard to build your network because people do want to meet each other. Part of their jobs is often networking. So it's just a very open and collaborative industry, but with the challenge that I think sometimes the lack of gender diversity can make that more intimidating, particularly when you're at the beginning of your career. And I'm so proud of what Code First Girls has achieved to try and shift that at least a little bit.
I still find it intimidating. I mean, I'm a natural introvert by character, and I still, I'm getting on quite a bit now. I'm in my 50s, and I've been in the tech world for quite some time now, and I still feel nervous when I walk into a great big room filled with people that I don't really know. And until I sort of settle on a friendly face and start striking up a conversation with somebody, and then feel a little bit more that lovely sigh of relief you can make. Oh, good, I can actually have a chat with this person. And then you start feeling like you can get more into it. So I think what you're doing, helping make those connections and help people see that it's just about striking up a conversation, make them feel a bit more comfortable, make them feel a bit more confident. I think this is such a precious gift.
Yeah, I hope so.
So can I ask you, what advice would you give to someone who wants to grow their network in the same way that you have over the last 10 years?
I would be intentional about it. So understand what you want that network for. Is it to get you new career opportunities? And I think one of the challenging things about the tech industry is that there is still a lot of hiring that happens under the radar, i.e. people hire people they know who happen to be available. So actually a lot of the best jobs never make it onto any of the hiring platforms that you see. Sure. Say you want to build your network to get you those sort of opportunities. I would try and find the most like-minded people to you. It's normally a good and easy starting point. So it might be that you join a particular women in tech group. It might be that you join a particular technology vertical group or industry vertical group. And this can either be online or physical communities as well. There are so many newsletters that go out with all the various events, the kind of tech events that are going on in your area. And it's hit and miss. Like some of them you'll go along, you'll be like, oh, this feels like such a waste of time. I've just given up my Thursday night, whatever it may be. And then some of them will be absolutely golden. It takes a while to work out which is which. But if you are intentionally building your network because you're trying to achieve a goal, actually you can see that as an investment rather than as wasted time. And then it's remembering that it's not enough to have a single interaction with people. It's working out how you can have multiple interactions with them. So how can you be useful to them? Other things that you can send them, other things that you can do for them. This kind of idea in the tech industry of give first. You should be trying to work out how you can support people and expect nothing in return. And that's how you build relationships, and the industry is very much built on people offering to help each other just for the sake of it. So yeah, I would be intentional about the network you want to build and what you want to get out of it, and see it as work. It's investing in your career.
That's fantastic advice, Alice. And so just moving into more women in tech, then I wanted to get your take on how the UK is performing in relation to women in the tech sector, women in entrepreneurial endeavors. How does the UK compare to California?
How does it compare to California? Well, I think if you look at what's happened within the tech industry in the last couple of years, we're seeing a complete shake-up, whether in California or the UK, at every level of the tech ecosystem. And so why is this important? So you need female founders coming through. You need women that are interested in founding companies and that are then supported and have the resources to do so. You also need to make sure that the people who are investing in them want to invest in women. And it turns out that actually the people that really like investing in women are often women. And I wish it wasn't the case, that everyone has conscious or unconscious biases that mean they often are more likely to invest in people like them. So I think one of the really positive shifts I've seen during my decade in this industry is the number of VC firms that now have investment partners that are women. I think there was a lot of token efforts 5-6 years ago, where you'd have a lot of junior women in VC firms to try and balance things out. But actually what you need are the decision makers, the people who can write checks, being more diverse. And so we've seen a real drive towards diversity, both in the UK and in Silicon Valley as well. I think one of the things that we're seeing at Entrepreneur First is that there are different types of companies that are attracting more women into entrepreneurship. One of the things that has shifted is the cost of building a biotech company is fallen rapidly. So probably in the last 3 or 4 years, it's changed fundamentally. You can now get kind of VC seed funding for a wet biotech company, something that previously would have been cost prohibitive to do through venture capital. And interestingly, what we're seeing is actually it's an area where there's a bunch of amazing female scientists that want to leave academia to build biotech companies. And so I'd say now one of our biggest kind of critical masses for female founders is in biotech. Speaking to doing a practice investment committee with one of our teams in Paris, which are two incredible female founders working on endometriosis. They've got a new way of identifying endometriosis, looking at genes. And, that's very much a female problem that women understand and want to solve, and hasn't really had a huge amount of investment in the past, or a huge amount of attention in the past, because women, weren't making that leap and weren't taking the risk to start those kind of companies, and then obviously weren't thinking about solving those kind of problems. So I think, the whole ecosystem has to change to improve diversity. It has to be who's investing, and that's at the LP stage. The LPs are the ones that fund the VCs. So it has to be at the LP stage, the VC stage, and the founder stage. Each of those parts has to change to improve diversity. But I do feel pretty positive about it. A career in tech can be one of the most exciting, challenging, life transformative paths you can take. And I worry that we put off young women by having so much negative press around it. I would love to see more and more stories about actually the amazing impact it can have in your life by being a founder or working in tech. So yeah, that's my sort of mild hobby horse. Let's talk about the positives and get more women to take the plunge.
But also your own statistics are proving the case, aren't you? You are actually driving more applications to Entrepreneur First from women. I mean, I was reading they're up by 37% this year, aren't they, even through the pandemic?
One of the really curious things about the pandemic is we saw a massive increase in applications from women, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, well, congratulations. I mean, I think that's it's testament to a lot of the work, not just Code First Girls, but lots of other organisations that have been trying to stimulate that interest. But it's wonderful that you've been able to sort of see that rise just over the last few months. I was going to ask a little bit about your own personal journey, that at one point you did decide, actually, even though I dropped maths and science when I was at school, and I don't consider myself to have great kind of attributes and leanings in that direction, but actually I want to code because I will be better at what I do if I do learn to code. What kind of gave you that sort of spark of inspiration and made you feel like you could do it?
When I first started Entrepreneur First, being surrounded by technologists was just so inspiring. And one of the things I love about my job is that every year something that wasn't possible the previous year suddenly becomes possible, and it's so exciting. And I became pretty frustrated pretty quickly about how little I understood and wanted to change that. And I felt very lucky that one of the very first EF cohort members kindly took me and another woman from the cohort and took us through the Stanford Computer Science Basics course. And he taught us for about 3 months. And to be honest, I absolutely hated it. I found it really hard. It did not come naturally to me, did not enjoy it. But the important point was not that I could code, and I can't. I'm terrible at it. It's more that I could understand the process, I could understand the way of thinking, and I could understand some of the language that was being used. So when we think about upskilling women to code with something like Code First Girls, we don't expect them all to become junior software developers. It's more about helping them understand how that world works, how technology works. How long does it take to build a simple web app? What are the acronyms or language that people use, and what does that mean? How can you build confidence to be surrounded by and work with technologists? So yeah, I am not technical by background and will never be deeply technical, but I think one of the beautiful things about working in technology, and particularly getting to invest in technology companies, is being exposed to the cutting edge. And I think every investor in the space has to at least have a basic understanding of whatever is the next technology coming through. Whether it's AI was the big thing for the last couple of years, now Web3 is becoming much more essential to everyone's levels of FOMO. But yeah, I would encourage, even if you don't enjoy the process of learning to code, even if you don't think it's for you, I think just pushing yourself to go through that can be hugely eye-opening and beneficial to your career.
And do you have any tips on resilience in general that will just give people a little bit of succor and courage if they're listening today?
I think the first thing as a founder is to recognize that this is incredibly hard. Most people don't found companies because generally the process is pretty hard and unpleasant. Being a founder is not like what you see on TV where you're on a private jet and spraying champagne around. It's usually intense amounts of stress, not seeing your friends and family, damage to your relationship, never doing any form of exercise, working all hours, eating badly. And that sucks to some extent. But if you're the sort of person that has this drive and urge to create, you can't do anything else. And one of the ways that I think about it is there's sort of micro happiness and macro happiness. And your micro happiness is day to day how you feel about what you're doing right now, the kind of the thing that you're doing. And then macro happiness is your long-term aspiration and goal that you're heading for. And the way that I kind of build my resilience as a founder is that I think often the micro is pretty crap, and actually the day-to-day is really tough. But the bit that keeps me going is I cannot imagine doing anything else with my life that would be so inspiring and worthwhile. I get to work with these incredibly talented people who are way more talented and ambitious than I am. And I get to play a very, very small part in transforming their lives and transforming their career paths. And that is just so addictive. I can't imagine any other startup or any other job that would give me the same sort of buzz from that. And so long term, I really believe that EF needs to exist. I believe that it is good for the world. And I believe that I am uniquely positioned to try and make that happen. One of the things to remember is who your customer is, and the problem that you end up working on is probably going to remain pretty consistent. So if you don't love that on day one, don't do it, because day 360, year 2, year 5, if you still don't like your customer and you still don't like the problem you're working on, you're just not going to have the resilience to keep going.
What advice do you give to the business owners to make sure they cultivate a culture within their organizations to encourage female ambition within the organization to become leaders, or to become potentially, shareholders themselves, to get ahead in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, we see that we have a kind of duty of care is probably the wrong, duty of intervention, I don't know what the right word is, with our alumni founders, that the more that we can educate and upskill them on diversity, unconscious bias, hiring processes, we can actually have a huge impact on the companies that they create. And it's really exciting to see some of these companies make big leaps forward. So we've got a company called N-Plan that is a construction tech company. It works on pretty heavy duty engineering projects. It's not a space particularly known for its gender diversity. What they did was from day one, minute one, was make sure that they had hiring processes that enabled and encouraged women to apply and supported them through the hiring process. So from day one, they had a gender balanced team in their engineering team, which is incredible. It's so hard to do, but through the intention, through the investment of their time and belief into this, they were able to give themselves that foundation. I mean, what we see time and time again is that it's very easy. You're 2 guys, you founded this company, you hire your friends, suddenly you're 6 guys. Actually, becomes increasingly hard to then get a woman to think that might be a good idea to join. And then suddenly you're 8 guys, you're 10 guys, and maybe you've got 1 woman and it looks a bit token. So the thing that we push our companies to do is to think very intentionally from the beginning, what can you do to make sure that you are hiring diversely, that your diversity today reflects the diversity that you want in the future. And sometimes there's some, silly things that need to be corrected. Like one of the slightly pernicious things I think in startup hiring is the culture interview. Now, if you are 2 guys that are trying to hire as the founders, how much have you thought intentionally at that stage about the diversity and inclusivity of your culture? Probably not that much. So the culture fit interview can then be like, we don't really get on. We don't want to talk about the same things. Well, actually, that's not how you build a diverse team. The key point here, and I think with everything around diversity, is just intention. If you have the intention, then invest in it. It needs to come from the top. It needs to come from the founders, and then it will work itself through the rest of the organization. EF is a great example of a company that, we're a VC basically, and we have a balanced gender at our most senior levels. And partly that's because we've worked really hard for that to be the case. And we've invested to make sure that we have diverse hiring shortlists, that we support women, that we support parents, that we support people through different phases of their life. And I think we're very lucky to have an amazing culture because of that.
What exciting endeavors have you got in store for 2022?
2022 is going to be a big year for us. We're launching our first Web3 program. It's our first vertical program. All our programs are general. This is the first one that we're doing in partnership with Tezos to support Web3 companies. I'm really excited to do this because I think when we look at the technological shifts that will change the way that we work and interact, I think Web3 could potentially be one of the biggest shifts we've seen. I think we were very lucky at EF to work very closely with the kind of AI revolution from 2012 onwards. But I'm really excited to get stuck into the kind of Web3 revolution. And we already have a bunch of companies, whether it be Aztec Protocol or Vaults, that have built pretty significant startups in this space. And I'm excited to spend more time working with and investing in those kind of companies.
So Alice, in relation to the Web3 stuff you're doing, I just wanted you to sort of break down Web3 for people who may not be familiar with what's going on there. Can you just tell us what it is and why it's such a big opportunity?
Big shift with Web3 that everyone is getting excited about is that for the first time, you can have ownership on the web. So if you think about Web 2, you basically provide your data to whichever big company. It's very centralized. The ownership sits with the big companies. Web 3 means that ownership can actually sit with the individual. You can own assets on the web. And not only that, you can build these kind of decentralized organizations that are basically a completely new way of running and building could be a company, it could be an organization, it could be whatever it may be. But these kind of DAOs, these decentralized autonomous organizations, who knows what this disruption could lead to, but I think it could be pretty fundamental. And when I look at the type of talent that is going into this space and is interested in working in this space, it makes me very excited for the future of Web3. So it's still very much early days. And obviously, probably most people will know about Web3 through things like crypto, so things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. But I think it's just the start. There's a lot happening in the space, and I think 2022 will be a very big year for it.
Fantastic. Okay.
Well, just the last thing from me, Alice, if you could sort of give one word of advice for people starting on their entrepreneurial journey as we are still going through the pandemic and we don't know what the future holds. Obviously, there's very uncertain times. What advice would you give people?
I would say there's never been a better time to start a company. The amount of money, positivity, support, employees, whatever resource you need to start a company, there has never been more of it in abundance in the UK and Europe. So even though we are in some of the most uncertain times globally because of the pandemic, the startup industry remains incredibly strong, booming. So if you're wondering whether now is the right time to take the plunge, it really is.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Ambition. It's all about ambition, Alice, isn't it?
All about ambition.
Fantastic. And just a last question from me then. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
Learn how to do customer development. Or maybe it would be build a startup with a business model. Yeah, for the first 3 years didn't actually have a business model, and having a company that has no way of making money, well, it's just not really a company.
Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Well, look, where can people find you? Not just yourself, Entrepreneur First, Code First Girls. And you've got another organization you're involved with, I believe, as well, so that we haven't asked you about. Generation, is it?
Yeah, Generation is a fantastic charity that supports young people into careers, not just in tech, but also in other industries.
Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Alice. Looks like Karensa's really enjoyed it. I certainly have. So thank you for so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been really great to see you both, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.